Thank you very much. I would actually use Roxana's quotation. Maybe you think that this is not that much of an academic topic, but maybe this is one of the reasons why I opted for talking about that once more in our international conference, because I do think that there is, it's very academic, it also has a lot of scientific background and research behind it, and it's under a general umbrella. That's why I think before we start, I need to tell you and give you a little bit of context. Practically, you may have seen the program that I work for a publisher, but this does not exactly reflect what I'm doing. I'm a positive educator as well. This is my area of research, positive education, which is linked to positive psychology. And practically what I do is to create as much awareness as possible, because I do have the floor as an international speaker in many conferences. And of course, this is not official yet, but I have a very close collaboration with HYPE and the International Positive Education Network in the United States, and Martin Seligman himself, who is the father of positive psychology, to promote more about positive education all over the globe. And this short introduction leads me to today's topic, which has to do with Zest. And we will try to see some of its practical applications in the classroom and maybe how we can generate it. The first time in literature that Zest appears as, if you would like, an idea or a theory is, in that particular journal in 2004 by Peterson and Seligman, of course, that they define the character strengths. These people have been researching for more than 3 years with their team in the depths of philosophy, history, even religion sometimes, and they came down to the 24 most important virtues and character strengths that can form a framework of development, of upskilling your character and create a more positive environment. And as you can possibly see, Zest is under the umbrella of the virtue of courage, alongside with bravery, honesty, and perseverance. That was the first time that we see Zest in literature, and of course there are so many papers about it. And then I could not fail, once I've been reading this book by Carol Dweck, to see that there was an exact quotation where Mrs. Dweck does encourage all the teachers, managers, educators to have and show Zest for teaching and learning, and openness to giving and receiving feedback, and ability to confront and surmount obstacles, because this is an exact quotation from the book. Zest definitely can actually make the difference. When you have the floor, you do influence, and in our case, you do teach something. It can actually inspire the people who could see you. Starting becoming even more specific, and I'm still within the sphere of the general, I need to debunk in a way misconception that has to do with positive psychology in connection to positive education. And I think this is the way and the moment where some people start talking about toxic positivity, and I couldn't agree more, because most of the people who create this narrative are the people who don't actually know what positive psychology is all about. It's not simply about accentuating the positive all the time, but it's about gearing up, robusting yourself when adversity is going to come. And this is something that, if you think about it, is an extremely important skill to have even at schools, because adversity is going to come anytime. And I'm not talking about tragedies, I'm talking about you received a bad grade, you may have to face a difficult teacher to communicate, you may have a problem with one of your classmates. What do you do? How do you deal with that in a more positive way? So this is one of the ways that we are going to steer today's presentation, one of these paths. The other comes from another book that I really love, from Gabriel Ochian, and there is an amazing story about Michael Phelps there, which says rethinking, positive thinking. And I think that's another why to more positive feelings in education, and gives a very clear explanation of an idea called mental contrasting. Practically, what it says is that it's fine if you want to have a wish or a dream. It's very good when you visualize the outcome, but at the same time, you need to visualize the obstacle. And not only that, have a plan in order to be able to surpass it. This lady has been working on this idea for years. 90% of a very high pool of people who participated in this research were the people who had a problem and found themselves their own solution without any kind of universe help or some kind of supernatural power. In other words, all the answers sometimes and the solutions do lie within ourselves. And this, I think, is the most positive outcome and message that we can get from positive psychology and positive education as well. When we talk about generating zest, and this does not come from me, it comes from Ryan Yemek, who was Seligman's student, and he delved more into the idea of character strengths. He said that, first of all, zest is one of the most unappreciated, in a way, character strengths. Not many people talk about it. And the second thing that he said is that the most contagious, because it's very closely related to happiness. 90% maybe of the people who feel zest, are zestful about life, are happy people as well. But he said something else, something very important, that it's not so much about generating zest, maybe with a magic wand, but it's about stopping what might block our students' zest. In a way, if we accept that this is something innate, that we all have enthusiasm or excitement about something, usually are these blockers that sometimes stops us, or the majority of the time stops us from becoming more zestful. So I will deal a lot with this idea. I'm sure maybe that you have been in a classroom like this, a classroom that everybody's full of energy and eager to participate, but at the same time, you may have been in a classroom like this, that nobody wants to participate for a reason, it's a down period. My first statement for today is that these are two non-permanent and very natural states. In other words, it can happen to everybody. It would have been abnormal if you have a person who is 24/7, full of beans, all this energy, this cannot actually happen. You need to have your downtime. This is happening, and it's very, very normal when it's happening in your classroom. There's nothing to worry about. And I would quote from another person that I had, how can I say, the honor to meet him, Tim Murphy. He's also an academic, but he's very much of my cast of people. He's an English language teacher, and he has been talking about positive emotions in the classroom long before even psychology decided to do that. And he talked about the roller coaster of knowledge. And he said, whatever you might try to learn, there is always this curve of up, down, which again is very, very normal. Why it's happening? I'm sorry, some other statements. It's very natural. There might be several roller coasters rolling at once. You may have the one with about friends, the other about maths. Not everyone likes everything. And of course, it's very, very personal. So all I'm saying is, from teachers to teachers, sometimes this is something that is happening. It's not that they don't want to participate or they don't feel excited about your lesson. It's just happening. Some of the reasons why might be lack of understanding, which means that we need to stop and revise. Negative emotions that might not be coming from the classroom. Fatigue. We're talking about tired kids today, but that's another story maybe for another conference as well. Information overload and not enough time for recycling, which again blocks any kind of excitement if you think about it. And of course, competition for attention. That's why this is another comment that I would like to make about Roxanne's presentation. It's that memes can actually help focus and grab the attention of the students as a vehicle for paving the way so they can become more academic and more, let's say, achieving higher performance in their studies. So it's the mean of grabbing attention because there are so many distractions out there. Make your students aware and encourage them to write on their own roller coaster. Bottom line, and thus you may achieve even more zest. My second idea for today comes from an activity that I have created, and it actually was generated from the constant comment that I would receive from many of my students. Every time there was an assignment, specifically composition writing, or an open assignment, I didn't know what to write. I had no inspiration. So I thought that maybe I should give them a lesson about inspiration. So I started provoking them in a way by asking them this question: are you a Cézanne or a Picasso? And obviously they were looking at me puzzled, but my idea came from when I read this book many years ago, Old Masters and Young Geniuses, where for the first time myself, I found out that there was a difference between what we call conceptual innovators in history and experimental innovators. And when I'm talking conceptual innovators, I'm talking about people who woke up one day, had a vision about something, and they created. Picasso is one of them. He painted Guernica in 3 days. Or even Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones. If you read his interviews, Satisfaction, which was still considered maybe the biggest rock song, he saw it in his sleep, in his dream. He woke up in the middle of the night, wrote the tune in a piece of paper right next to him. He went back to bed, and the next morning, he actually came up with Satisfaction. But experimental innovators are the people who struggle with their inspiration. People that, they could not simply wake up and have an illumination, being illuminated about something. These are some of the conceptual innovators in history: Jan Vermeer, Van Gogh, Herman Melville, James Joyce, of course, Orson Welles, Picasso, and Sylvia Plath as well. They could simply wake up one day and produce. But people who struggle with their inspiration, like Rembrandt, if you go to the Rembrandt Museum, you will see paintings that it took him like 100 different drafts before he produces the final one. Alfred Hitchcock, we all know that he became famous at his 50s. Jason Pollock, he was rejected as incompetent to paint as well. Even Michelangelo, Antonioni, Rembrandt, and of course, Virginia Woolf as well. So bottom line, no matter if you're a Cézanne or a Picasso, it doesn't matter, you are still awesome. And this is something that we need to explain in simple words to the kids, because sometimes this discourages them. They simply give up just because they don't have ideas. It can happen to everybody. The third statement for today comes from this man, Tony Schwartz. He's not an academic, but I think he has a very powerful book called Engagement, which is very much aligned to the topic of this session. And he simply stated in this book a very powerful statement that the dominant ethic of the last 200 years everywhere is more plus bigger plus faster equals to better. And where I live, in the Balkans, I try to apply this to education there. And I found out that definitely this applies a lot to an educational context. We have more qualifications, packed curriculums, excessive testing, and specifically when it comes down to language teaching, miraculous magic wands courses that they can actually promise Japanese, English, or Chinese in 3 months, fast-track intensive courses. Somehow deep down, we have actually convinced ourselves that if we do something faster, it's going to be better as well. And there is also this very interesting idea of time gluttony by Brian Robinson that is very much related to that. And practically what Mr. Schwartz is saying is, guys, whatever you do, what you see right now on the screen does not change. You still have 24 hours per day, 168 hours in a week, 8,760 hours in a year. Time does not change. But what can change is energy. The energy that you need to have in order to perform all of those things. And I'm sure you do have that friend that is constantly complaining about not having sufficient time during the day. We are not created to work like computers in a linear way. Remember the roller coaster. There are 4 sources of energy in the human system. No time to analyze it now, but you will realize that it takes an entire internal village for us to create energy. And sometimes it gets really wasted. Now transfer that to the classroom sometimes to your students, and maybe you will get an answer why they might not be zestful, because they're lacking energy for your lesson. What would we propose? More breaks. Periodization is a concept from professional athleticism, but actually leads to high performance because the athletes that run marathons or they're participating in all the universal championships, they do practice a lot of rest before they actually get into the battle. So starting from that, if you feel that your classroom is tired, give them a break, and maybe this can actually recharge their energy levels. As a non-native speaker of English and dealing a lot with foreign English as a foreign language in foreign languages, the concept of making a mistake is something that has actually been haunting me since my school years, because there was always this thing, what's going to happen if I make a mistake when I speak in English? And that sometimes was really, really a discouragement for me. I'm gonna give you two quotes, one from the academy. Learners are sometimes stopped not only by their errors, but also by their fear of making them, by Vivian Selinger. And another one, which is not academic, it came from the mother of Drew Barrymore. She actually had a premiere in the theater in Broadway, and she forgot her words. And she stopped and she simply laughed and moved on. And at the press conference, she simply said, you grew up the day you have your first real laugh at yourself. Meaning that let's create more mistake-free classrooms, change the meaning of mistakes, laugh at our mistakes, make small mistakes on purpose, and of course the myth of complete sentences, which is very specific and has to do with language learning. Sometimes we want to say very long phrases, but we fail to remember that our brain simply cannot store so much information. So keep it simple, go for it, risk a little, and like this. Encourage your students to make, no matter what you teach, as many mistakes as possible, because this might be another source of discouragement. When you remember, you become efficient. When you're efficient, you feel confident. And of course, confidence generates zest. These are some of the ways that I always share with language teachers, how they can actually make it maybe more personal, tell it like a story, make, of course, a lesson more meaningful, and of course, fun is something memorable. This goes for memes as well. They help a lot with memory because they see it every day. Now, travel back in time, and this is not one of Dostoevsky's most famous books, but back in 1863, when you would read this book, Winter Notes on the Summer Impressions, you would actually come across this phrase. Try to pose for yourself this task, not to think of a polar bear, and you will see that the first thing will come to mind every minute. Back then, there was no psychology, not positive, neither positive nor negative, but this man actually did write this. And many years ago, Daniel Wegner, who is one of the most read psychologists of the time, he came up with the intentional operating process versus ironic monitoring process. In other words, negative feelings are going to come to you, no matter who you are or where you live. And this is actually proved by neuroscience. Rick Hanson, the Velcro effect. My friend Alan Bruce talked about Velcro, and in the morning session, we all have a built-in negativity bias in a way. Chances are that you're going to see things more negative than positive. And all I'm saying is just that this will happen to your students. You may have one student that does have this, or a friend, this practice. Block your Zest killers before they block you. There is a term called junk thoughts. It's a book that I found somewhere, maybe from an indirect way, because it's out of print, by Jill Anderson in 1981. It's called Thinking, Changing, Rearranging, where you can actually find all the quotations of exactly these negative feelings that may visit your students' brains, overgeneralizing, catastrophizing, hopping out, and demanding as well. I'm shy, everybody else is better, I want to be perfect, I'm not top dog anymore. How can we eliminate this? With group dynamics, can eliminate false beliefs. The more you work as a group, the more they share these negative thoughts, chances are that they will have other people within the group, other students who feel the same. This is how you minimize the risk of these thoughts. because the more you talk about it, the more you actually are able to overcome it. And from Tim Murphy, last suggestion, the sparring model, if your students are stuck, if you do not know what to do because maybe they are overwhelmed by negative feelings, make it specific, make it personal, use it, repeat, and recycle. And I'm sure you will find a lot of applications, no matter if you teach English or any other subject. Am I on time? Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you, George.